Look, I think at the end of the day, the vast majority of the people who voted for me, who supported me, will understand and do understand that Donald Trump is the most dangerous president in the modern history of this country. He's a pathological liar. He's a racist and a sexist, a homophobe, etc. And I think at the end of the day, they will be voting for Joe Biden. But I think what Joe is going to have to do, and he's beginning to move in that direction, is to say to those working class people, say to those young people, say to those minorities, listen, I understand your situation. You know, I understand that you are graduating college with tens and tens and tens of thousands of dollars in debt.
See, that's just it, Sanders. It's not enough to say it. You actually have to mean it. You actually have to mean the things that you say, meaning the public have to believe that you're an authentic actor when you're making that particular argument about support this policy or that policy. And I have to be honest, up to this point, Joe Biden has not done that. Joe Biden doesn't support those policies that you push for in your platform that all of these people backed. He just doesn't do it. Sanders is basically making a least worst argument here. Hey, Jeff Weaver put out a memo saying that your supporters weren't going to back Joe Biden in sufficient numbers for Joe Biden to win. Are your people going to back Joe Biden? To which Sanders says, yeah, I think they're going to back Joe Biden. Why? It's not policy. What did he say? Well, I think they understand that Donald Trump is the worst president ever. Least worst argument. Donald Trump is the worst ever. Joe Biden is the least worst. In relative terms, it's the pragmatic choice to pick Joe Biden. But that's just it. I've heard people make that argument all the time. Least worst, always pointing to the Democrat as being least worst. This person's incrementally less worse than the other. So it makes all the sense in the world to choose the person who's incrementally less worse. That argument is not right. That argument hasn't been right for 40 years, and yet this has been an argument that people have gone by, choosing this narrow focused pragmatism that destroys all context in regards to your politics. It's true that we all don't necessarily have the same biases in mind, meaning there are different things that drive us and motivate us in regards to our politics. So fair enough. But because of that, by just definition of relative interest, the least worst argument makes sense if you're a Democrat and this is all you want. You don't want necessarily anything that's revolutionary. You just want to keep the system the way it is or go back to the Obama era. But if you're not, if you're one of those people that back Sanders, if you're one of those people that want those policy ideas to be pushed and implemented into law, least worst is the worst thing in the world to try to get you to that particular point on the timeline. Meaning, if you indeed want Medicare for all, if you indeed want expansion of Social Security and elimination of student debt, if you want those policies, I mean, after all, you're backing this guy for those specific policies. If you indeed want those policies, least worst is the worst way and makes it literally impossible to get. Welcome to the soapbox. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox, an early morning soapbox. We're going to have to get to the meeting in a few minutes. But I saw this clip and I wanted to have a conversation about it. This idea of least worst. I understand it's been ensconced in our political system for God knows how long. Lefties look at people who voted for Joe Biden in the primary and they ask, how on earth can these people vote for that guy? Well, the catch here is the argument, or the main argument in this particular election was one about electability. That is the very argument that Sanders didn't fight, didn't bring up. And Sanders was considered risky. So not bringing up that argument made it that much worse for Sanders in this race. On the secondary front, Joe Biden made that argument all the time. I'm going to beat Trump like a drum. I'm going to beat Trump like a drum. And from the standpoint of what people consider to be a normal Democrat, Joe Biden is that normal Democrat. The fact that Joe Biden lost, or Clinton lost, and Gore lost, and Kerry lost, doesn't entirely factor in from the standpoint of the way media frames him. And from that matter, from the way he's framed just by definition of the other Democrats that are around him. So, yes, he lost. The point I'm trying to make here is turning around and supporting the other candidate when that other candidate in no way backs your policy interests, doesn't advance your policy interests. Medicare for All at this point, right now, has 88% Democratic support. We are in a Democratic primary. The Democratic Party has just put out a $3 trillion plan that was supposed to showpiece what they represented as a party. And what did they do? They backed money for lobbyists and insurance companies. Understand what I'm saying here. Medicare for All has 88% approval by Democrats, 70% approval by everybody else for the rest of the population. Nearly 50% approval with Republicans. And despite having that much support and that much approval, the Democratic Party votes for insurance companies and pushes this idea of COBRA, which is basically just a giveaway to insurance companies. The point I'm trying to make to you is your political process is broken. If you have a policy that has that much support, almost unanimity in regards to the number of people that support that policy regarding Democrats, and your political instrument, Democratic Party, ignores that. Not just ignores that, subverts that. They could have put that in the bill. They chose not to. Joe Biden could have backed it. He chose not to. Joe Biden went so far as to say, I'd veto it. I'm making the point that something is wrong with your political process when you have a policy that's that popular and the party that is supposed to represent the interests of that party, of that group that is supporting that policy to the tune of 88%, doesn't. What is the point of your political instrument, be it government or, for that matter, the parties themselves, if not to represent the interests of their constituencies? And when the constituencies have decided on a policy to the tune of this high, and you're in the middle of a pandemic where you have a surge of support because of that, if you can't get your political instrument, more specifically, your political party that is supposed to represent your interests, to support a policy that has 88%, I am making the point to you that there is something wrong with your party, something wrong with your political instrument, where they've lost all tether to the American public. Now, the question is why? Why has that political instrument lost all support? Why has that political instrument become untethered from what the public wants? To make this even worse, student debt forgiveness could have been in this $3 trillion bill. The Democratic Party said, oh, wow, this costs too much money, in which case they cut that particular proposal down. Again, $3 trillion bill that's supposed to represent and show what they stand for has no chance of getting pushed out, but that's not the point of the bill. I'm making the point that even when policies are dramatically popular in the context of the party, you don't get those policies. We are in the middle of a pandemic. Medicare for All is at 88%, and your political instrument still says no. What is the point of backing the party if you can't get your political interests fulfilled? Even in the middle of a pandemic with 88% support, how would you ever get what you want implemented into law from the standpoint of Medicare for All and universal health care if you can't get it done through the party that right now, with 88% support, still says no? Basic point. You have basically fell in line. You're going to have vote shamers that are going to be coming out like maggots trying to basically get people to back any random blue. The catch here is by losing all notion of accountability in your political process with this kind of narrow focused pragmatism of the very specific moment, misses the context of time where you could see your political instrument move further and further and further to the right as you got convinced to vote for least worse over and over and over again, until you got to the point where they had no expectation that you would deviate from this particular habituated behavior of just voting for any random Democrat. And because you were willing to vote for any random Democrat, all notions of accountability was drained out of the political process. You continually voted for somebody not because of an affirmative argument of who they were, but entirely because of who they weren't. And in doing so, slid the process further and further to the right and made that process that much more tone deaf from the standpoint of what the public wanted. Why do they have to cater to the public if ultimately you're going to turn around and vote for whoever they put up anyway? This is kind of the point that I'm trying to make here. Electing and backing Joe Biden and any random Democrat not only cuts down the number of people who come and vote in the political process because it basically gets across to them that you don't care about their interests. that the political process is not going to deal with their material needs. And because it's not going to deal with their material needs, they don't invest the time. So constituencies, people of color, people making under 30,000 that would typically vote Democrat, just stay home. Meaning, regardless of whatever you think of my particular political opinion, that's just flat fact true. As opposed, and beyond that point, when you get a candidate like Sanders that's running in the race that is putting all these lefty policies, yes, those people agree with those policies. By the same token, those people haven't seen those policies implemented for the last 40, 50 years. And because they haven't seen those policies implemented for that long, they look at Sanders and say he's a wild card. I'm trying to get across to you that there are consequences that go beyond any specific individual election and the candidates that are elected, especially in the sense where you have this kind of marginal difference between the two characters. And in this very specific case, just like over the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years, least worse has basically brought you to where you are now with ineffective politicians that are basically tone deaf to the demands of not just the Democratic Party itself, but the public entirely. Look at your world. You're in the middle of a pandemic. And in the middle of that pandemic, you still can't get Medicare for all passed, despite winning the argument entirely on Medicare for all. Even in places where Sanders got a mud hole stumped in him, he won the argument on Medicare for all. And nevertheless, your party still doesn't support it. Why should you support a party that even in this particular situation is not willing to acquiesce to the policy demands? And the question that really needs to be asked is, does the Democratic Party, are they so against those policy ideas that get 88% support that they would rather Trump lose? Meaning, if they don't want to take getting rid of student debt, universal debt relief, expanding Social Security, increasing the minimum wage, or for that matter, Medicare for all, again, that has 88% support. All of these policies are popular. If you're not willing to do that, then I am making a very basic point. Then they are not willing to get your vote. Does the Democratic Party, is it so against those policy ideas that the American public, for the most part, agrees with, including Medicare for all, that they're willing to let Trump win? If Trump is that much of a walking apocalypse, how on earth can you make a legitimate argument to me of not acquiescing, accepting Medicare for all, or for that matter, getting rid of student debt, if that means Joe Biden unifies the party? I don't understand an argument that legitimizes that particular position of not taking concessions for a policy that get 88% support. If you are indeed a lefty, you should not support a party where you cannot and ever get what you want to accomplish without using leverage in the process. Leverage in that political process is being able to stand under policy to the tune of millions and say no. It would have been great if Sanders did that, but Sanders didn't do that. It would have been great if he utilized his list to join all of those people together so they can talk and converse and come up with demands from the standpoint of a group, not just from an individual. But he didn't do that. By the same token, you as an individual can still make that particular point of, this is my litmus test. I am in no way going to back down from a policy that 88% support in the middle of a pandemic with 33 million people that's lost their jobs and an estimated 30 million people that lost their health care. No, if you're not willing to back this, you shouldn't get that support. Least worse has brought you to this point of ineffective politicians. Least worse has brought you to the point where these guys don't even listen to what you want, where your marginalization at that point is basically incentivized and continually voting for any random Democrat. As Sam Cedar said, he'd vote for a can of soup if it had a D on it. Broken man Bernie. Broken man Bernie. Old gringo. Policy over parties or personalities. Yes, old gringo. That is absolutely entirely true. Parties over personalities. Like, share,